Okay, welcome. This is our third day, and it's really amazing to get to take time out to dwell on the topic, not other than great compassion. So, once again, I'm very, very grateful for this opportunity, and I very much hope that this sharing, this gathering, reflection, all of this contribute to our individual spiritual progression, as well as through that to the community, immediate and far. And may it help in healing the world, making us all realize this wonderful potential that we all have embedded within us from so long, from time immemorial. So I have received a special request from the community to have silent spaces in between. They were wonderful to do that. And I'll try to accommodate that to the extent possible. Should be possible if we agree to have it for the whole session, but that cannot be. So that's what I'm saying, to the extent possible, because I have to strike the balance between spending time, right, allotting time for meditation, as well as pushing through the text. So once again, I call upon you to find yourself in comfortable position. The back's upright, unless it is a problem, in which case you could just be in whatever position you feel comfortable. Supposing we are in an upright position, keep the head slightly bent, but not overarching. With positions that you're already familiar with, find yourself in a comfortable position, comfortable form. And try to just have a feeling of the here and now, or one's presence in the environment that one is. Maybe through sensing the body sensations in general, through that register one's being, one's presence, and also recall the occasion that you are in. Let them all help in creating a conducive mental state, mental preparation. Now we will together take 3 rounds of deep, deliberate breathing, beginning with an in-breath. This we will try to do together at my signal. So try to gather the mind to the present by anchoring it to the breathing, as we do in this deep, deliberate form for the first few rounds, and then go on from there. Once again, find yourself in a comfortable position. Maybe take a time out here in attending to any feelings of unease or tension, wherever it may be, if there is. Feel like you are attending there and soothing it out. Feel like you have taken care of it. Come back to the presence. Let's begin with the in-breath. Now slowly let the breathing settle into a natural rhythm. Take your time in adjusting it, slowly but gradually, to settling into a natural flow, where you let the breathing happen on its own, breathing in and out through the nostrils. And all we do is try to stay aware of it, connecting the mind to the natural breathing in real time. If it is helpful, try to also connect with the sensations associated with the process of breathing. Sensations at the entrance of the nostrils, into the nostrils, every time we breathe in and out. And staying connected with the breathing, try to do so with all those factors of alertness, attentiveness, ardentness, or ardently with enthusiasm, all combined together in being with the breath, where we try not to fix it or judge over it or try to regulate it. Let it be just however it requires to be. Don't expend any exertion in controlling it, in regulating it. Just let it be fully itself. All we do is stay connected with it by feeling the sensations. This we try to do one breath at a time, round after round, for as long as we can. Whenever in between we lose track of the breathing and we happen to recognize that, be sure to be realistic in acknowledging it, but not giving into any sense of fuss over it, any sense of madness over it, but rather be gentle to yourself, merely acknowledging it and caring to come back to the breathing and start over again. And now slowly let go of this focus on the breath. Instead, let the mind settle into a simple state of awareness, where you open your mind and let the spaciousness of the mind revealed, where you let thoughts, ideas, any kind of mental states, full freedom to exit and enter the mental space that you have opened up generously. And while we do so, let's make it a point to maintain that openness, again with those elements of alertness, attention, enthusiasm combined together. Every time you catch yourself either holding on to any particular thoughts, ideas, or chasing after them, or resisting them, kind of confronting them, in any form of engagement with them, just merely acknowledge that, let go of that, come back to the open spaciousness of the mind that you try to maintain with alertness, attentiveness, and enthusiasm, while letting the thoughts, in whatever forms they may be, full freedom to just be however it requires to be. Now, taking advantage of this relative openness of the mind, cleared of any disturbing thoughts or not, at this point, recall our analogy yesterday, that of the water wheel with all of its components. Now let go of the example. Try to think of ourselves being in that same condition, in this very life. Think of how from the day we were born till now, and to how remaining time we may have on this planet, in this life. Think of how certain things are established from the first day. There are certain barriers that we cannot go over. Think of what are those conditions that we are constrained with and remain so for this whole life. These are something that we have inherited. And from a Buddhist perspective, they can be accounted for only through the workings of karma. In other words, the results of our own actions from before. Like something had preceded in us before our birth, that is having its consequences felt now. Not necessarily all the causes we had engaged in, but those which happen to have been activated just before our birth, so that the results, the consequences, the effects of them have ripened and have started bearing on us. Some of them will stay throughout the life. Some of them, if we make efforts against them, could be mitigated if they are unwanted ones, or could be improved upon if they are what we aspire to have more. Our body, for instance, is one of them, together with its inescapable elements, be that of susceptibilities, limitations, some in our mind in the form of our proclivities, our tendencies, and yes, our afflictive dispositions. So many of them that we have learned over time to work against, how much we have succeeded, how big a hand, how strong a grip they have on us. And particularly when we think of the causes, the origin, the source of these afflictions in the self-grasping, in the grasping at an inherently existent I and mine. On top of that, a very strong self-obsession, self-centeredness. It's almost like these two have bonded together and have gained such a stronghold in us that they are virtually ruling us. And the afflictions are all offshoots of them. From the first day till our end, our mind is the primary driver behind every move that we make, intentionally, unintentionally, voluntarily, involuntarily, reactively, responsively. Look at the nature of our mind, how competent it is, how smart or not it is, how pre-fed it is with negative outlooks, perspectives, so deep-rooted, giving rise to those spontaneous negative readings of just about everything we lend our attention on, or we are confronted with, how they have consequences on our well-being, on our actions, on our relationships. Both immediate and long-term. In the midst of all of this, how susceptible we are of going up, going high, going low, almost without our control. And nor is there any particular order between the two. And between the two, how more often cases that we go low, low to lower to lowest, and within the lowest, so many degrees of them. How rare is an occasion for us to rise above and go high. How we find ourselves at the mercy of our unruly, misinformed, misfed mind, which confides in nothing but our self-obsession and self-grasping, which have almost built a permanent stronghold in the core of our being. Fortunately for us, we have learned the whole mechanism of this misrule over us, have even seen subtle devices, designs of different components of it. But think of where our efforts have gone, where our efforts have led to in terms of moving them, in terms of unsettling them. In the course of which we are as much subjected to series of feelings of pains, miseries, depression, stress, burnouts, all of this mental negativities. The list goes on and on and on that we reel into, almost without any control over them. We're just swayed by them, driven by them. In the meantime, lose full control of ourselves, almost to the point of losing our mind, almost like we are totally at the mercy of others, some other external force. Again, as I said earlier, we are lucky, fortunate to have risen to the occasion, to acknowledge this, to know what's happening, and also have some insights into what could be done, where the crux lies. We have seen how our efforts, no matter how small, feeble they may be, they have, at times they were generated, had their corresponding impact, giving us hope, confidence that yes, this is the right way, right path to pursue. And if I persist in my efforts, yes, there is hope to overturn this negative rule over me and retain, revive, restore my own self-mastery. With this hopeful note, let's come out of the meditation by opening our eyes or lifting our gaze at our own ease, convenience. So we were discussing, yes, stanza 8. We were in the middle of discussing it. Yeah, I was saying that the metaphor being used here, or rather, I don't know if this is a metaphor or, yeah, maybe it's a metaphor. The metaphor being used here is something common with the next stanza as well, in that the focus is on different aspects of it. So in the case of the first one, the stanza 8, so we remember that we are dealing with the three ways of classifying compassion in general, and in particular great compassion. By that, what I meant is we could speak in terms of three compassion, in terms of these three compassion, in regard to the general compassion, which may not be as developed and as extensive as great compassion. Likewise, we can speak of immeasurable compassion also, not necessarily something that is in the bodhisattvas, but with those who are yet to enter into the bodhisattva path, or someone in the Shravaka and Pratyeka Buddha vehicle. Even in terms of the immeasurable compassion, given the specific quality, what you call specific qualities or elements to be present for immeasurable compassion, immeasurable love. Even there also we can speak of these, of three types, three subtypes within them, along the lines of being merely focusing just on the sentient beings, or focusing on the phenomena, rather because focusing on phenomena, not the phenomena, but focusing on phenomena and focusing on the objectness. So here, obviously, we are speaking in terms of great compassion, which means they have to all fulfill the fundamental criteria of a great compassion. On the basis of that, we then make a case of how within that also we could find differences in terms of what we bring in together with the compassion. So in the case of the second one, here, what do you call it? A conscious awareness of the sentient beings being in this either ever changing, fluctuating, transient nature is brought up to the attention of the compassion, or it could be similar other aspects of the sentient being, which all point to its being not that perfect, or it's being kind of susceptible to more problems, right? It's being almost like a container for more limitations and predicaments to kind of to seep into. So, namely, other than the impermanent nature, it could be its gross selfless nature in relation to its aggregates, of how the person or the being, the sentient being, too, is not different than the aggregates in being vulnerable, in being feeble, in being just barely kind of holding on, as opposed to our projected, either deliberately or inherited from our past habituation, inherited projection, misprojection of some kind of a extraordinary status on it. So seeing through that, exposing that, and bringing that into light to bear on while one is also focusing on the suffering nature of sentient beings. So this other outlook could, or these other insights or exposure could take the form of seeing through the misprojection, misbelief that there is a self which is enjoying a privilege over the afflictions, over the aggregates, in being permanent as opposed to being impermanent, as being unitary as opposed to being just dependent on, contingent on parts, as being independent rather than dependent. So one kind of sees through that misprojection and sees how it is on par, same as aggregates in being as vulnerable, as delicate, and limited. That, together with the suffering, focus on the suffering, adds to the gravity of the situation there. On top of feeling or maintaining this awareness of the connection with the sentient beings, of the indebtedness to the sentient beings for their kindness, for their contributions, so if you will, or for their making themselves available for one to simply grow and elicit meaning out of one's life and one's time. So the example is the same surface of the water, where a short while ago there was very clear, uncompromised, unmitigated, clear, stable image of moon, full moon there. All of a sudden, gentle breeze, continuous breeze, happened to come through, and that disturbs the surface of the stability of the surface of the river, so that now what was earlier a very clear, solid kind of image, a reflection of the moon, is now hardly staying put, even for the moment, single moment, but kind of fluctuating. And that's reflective of how everything around us, everything compounded in nature around us, is subject to being constantly changing. And in the case of those steeped in samsaric condition, in the sense of kind of being totally reliant on afflictions and the other faults of samsara, in the form of strongly ingrained misperceptions, misunderstandings, misconceptions, or whatnot, that kind of makes it even graver, and that contributes to constant degeneration of the condition, not just merely fluctuating and staying put there without any change, without any degradation, but rather every moment is moving without stop to degradation, be that in the form of moving towards an illness, sickness, whatnot, but constantly into old age, into eventual death. And then on top of that, because of the afflictions and all these other misgivings, kind of ripe with the conditions for something worse to happen. So let me move on to the next one, and then we can speak of the three, this group of three compassion in general, in terms of the dynamics of the differences and whatnot. So the next one, the ninth stanza reads like this: I praise compassion that also focuses on the objectless, that sees all beings, however they appear, to be empty of inherent existence, like the reflection of the moon in water. So here it's again the same conditions, the same qualities and conditions in place for in terms of being great compassion, except now an additional focus, additional awareness or insight, awareness, focus uh, is on the objectlessness, or rather the lack of inherent existence of the sentient beings. And sentient beings are always lacking inherent existence, but rather here the person who is generating the compassion on the sentient beings brings into the focus, brings into play in terms of affecting the quality of the awareness of the suffering and the wish for them to be free from them, with this additional awareness of their being lacking an inherent existence, of their being just merely contingent on their basis of imputation. And that by itself contributes a great deal in refining the quality of the compassion, in seeing just about every aspect of it in the light of that lack of inherent existence, I suppose, beginning with those of the sentient beings, and then by extension, and by extension, maybe by effect, by almost you could say by radiance, affecting the other aspects of its focus in terms of the suffering and others and the wish. And thus, to that extent, it has this effect of refining the practice, in what we might call purifying the practice of this otherwise limiting, constraining misprojections. Now, in terms of who may have these different, these three compassion, is, of course, for the second and the third one, it has to be someone who has generated this understanding of the impermanent nature in the first place, or that of the other aspects of selflessness. And then, of course, in the case of the third one, that of the understanding and kind of an unmistaken understanding and insight into the lack of inherent existence and nature of not just a sentient being, but maybe others as well. And so that while one is focusing on the sentient beings, one is able to bring in that to bear on this encounter with the sentient beings as well. But nonetheless, a bodhisattva, even at the Arya level, which would be someone who have already generated these insights into impermanent and into the other lesser levels of selflessness, as well as this of the profound, subtle, dependent nature of things, not only have generated insight, but would have developed them to the level of direct perception, to the level of equipoise. But once they come out of the equipoise, which is when they would generate or give rise to all of these other conventional realizations and conventional aspects of their growth and awareness, they may or may not bring in a live experience of those insights to bear on the respective compassion. In other words, what I'm saying is an Arya Bodhisattva who would have not only generated insight, unmistaken insight into impermanent and other selflessness nature of sentient beings, as well as that of the subtle, impermanent, interdependent nature of things, or the impermanent nature of things. But when it comes to generating compassion, it's not that they always carry with them a live experience of it. They have it accessible. They can, whenever an attention kind of is drawn to that, they could right away generate it and give rise to it and kind of find themselves in the middle of it. Whereas it is not necessary for them to have all of these realizations lively experienced, lively manifest whenever they generate great compassion. So that is to say that an Arya being could also have the first type of great compassion at one point, the second one at some point, and the third one at some point, with no particular order between them. So now, what I want to bring in what I want to bring on the table, as the expression goes, is somewhere in the note on the copy that you have of the translation, original translation. It does not necessarily say clearly, but it seems to suggest like what additional things that this second and third compassion brings in might amount to. I'm saying might. Doesn't say very clearly, but it kind of, in a way, it makes this point of how Tsongkhapa may be different from other scholars and other schools on their take of the differences between the three. It seems to suggest that in the case of the second and the third, not only in the case of the second and the third, these additional perspectives, be that of impermanence and other surface nature of sentient beings, or that of the emptiness nature in the case of the third one, these insights or these insights seem to kind of seem to become part of the mode of apprehension, whereas in the illumination of intent itself, it's very clear that that Tsongkhapa doesn't buy that, and he not only not buy that, but kind of brings it up as a query, as a proposition, kind of a voluntarily proposing it as a consideration, and he rejects it. So when it comes to the mode of apprehension or the object of apprehension, all of these three compassions seem to be similar in that all they have as their object of apprehension is the mere wish for the sentient beings to be freed from suffering. Whereas this additional insight accounted for a preceding steep awareness, active awareness of them, kind of leaving a lingering impact of that insight to kind of have to bear on the nature or the quality of the compassion that they generate. But the compassion themselves, in turn, do not seem to be actively kind of adopting that insight as part of the mode of apprehension, except it leaves it at the object of focus. I don't know whether that makes any sense or not. It's quite difficult to wrap one's head around that also. But what I sense is when they see the sentient being, they see the sentient beings in the light of being impermanent, in the light of being lacking inherent existence, while at the same time So they cannot avoid but see sentient beings as well as see them in those light. And then, as part of their compassion mission, they focus on, they kind of get involved in generating this wish for them to be free from suffering. So that's all I can say about this. It is, but in certain scriptures, it makes it what do you call, elucidates, it expounds on this difference by way of saying that in the case of the second and the third compassion, they would have an active realization of their respective conditions or the qualities, the respective fields or the qualities of the sentient beings. They would have a corresponding, a corresponding awareness of it, separate from the compassion at the same time. Of course, the awareness, the wisdom part of it may have started beforehand, but carries on while the person, the being, generates compassion, so that the influence of it cannot be avoided in terms of affecting the quality or the awareness or the environment of the sensibility of the compassion, yet not quite to the point of making into the mode of apprehension of the compassion, but being with it strong enough to kind of send that signal. But my own personal input here in terms of how and why this makes for a special case and why this is something to be pursued even and talked about even, is because I think not that I've seen very clear 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 verification of it, clear verification of it, or clear elucidation of it. But I think how this additional insight into the impermanent nature of sentient beings, how this insight into the emptiness nature of sentient beings contributes to the compassionate sentiment is how, though not necessarily actively, but indirectly, by by what would be the expression? By implication, maybe, or drawing on prior awareness of the connection between how lack of awareness of the impermanent nature of things, which in other terms is how falling into the trap of projecting things to be permanent has a big role in generating suffering, in adding to the suffering nature of sentient beings. On top of the afflictions, this additional projection and buying into things being permanent, beginning with the hope, belief, and kind of convince, and kind of taking for granted, that element kind of has a very significant role in adding to the hold of suffering on us, be that the projection into permanence or that of other levels of grosser selfhood, or of course, that of inherent existence. And because of that, uh, the being generating, even though generating compassion, but because of being impacted by this awareness, affected by it, influenced by it at that time, is able to kind of bring in to bear on their level of compassion this implied connection between how giving into the opposite of what one is seeing is what is contributing to the added layer of suffering on the part of the sentient beings. So that's my own uh, my own 2 cents here, my own take here of how to make a case for how this is a big deal, how this is at least an extra deal in this fold. And maybe in the questions we will be able to discuss things. I think because not necessarily in the context of these 3 compassions, but there are deliberations on this, of how the sharp faculty bodhisattvas begin with realizing emptiness before even entering into the fold of the bodhisattvas, or before even generating bodhicitta, and how that realization kind of helps them in what do you call, in making their compassion and the urge to attain Buddhahood even more urgent and more informed and stronger, because of seeing how not only sentient beings are suffering, but there is a way out of it, which is so close but so distant from sentient beings. So by seeing that paradox of how close it is, but at the same time how distant it is, how it is not seen, and is having a big deal, a big impact in what they're going through, that they aspire earnestly to be freed from, yet not able to lend their hand on the antidote, on the means out of it, which is so close to them. Yeah, in a way, this also points to the paradox of our life, how all there is to be known to really make a difference is right here with us and is never leaving company with us. Yet at the same time, we hardly see it and hardly care to get a sense that this is where we should look at. And even when we try to look at, we are not necessarily successful. But so by that, I'm pointing to our mind, right? The very nature of mind, the way it is in terms of its clear light nature, be that on the conventional level or on the ultimate level, or on the level of the subtlest clear light mind level, of the very fundamental underlying level of it. All of these 3 layers, 3 stacks of clear light nature of the mind is all along with us. And if only we could connect with any one of them, it could make a big difference in our prospect of building genuine joy and happiness, and then move from there into the other layers of clear light, the nature of our mind that is always with us and embedded within us. So in the scriptures also we see the connection between the realization of emptiness gained beforehand and how that plays a role in even what do you call, reinforcing and strengthening the practice of compassion and bodhicitta. Whereas in the case of those bodhisattvas who have generated bodhicitta, preceded by great compassion, but still fall short of understanding understanding emptiness, and have to, in the meantime, what you call, depend on a lesser perspective into the nature of mind or whatnot. They pay the price because of a lack of it. So that's how I am connecting that part with this here. Okay, I think we should also move on, right? So yeah, so number 10, stanza 10. Yeah, here I'm proposing a slightly different rendition of it. When the potential for meditating on great compassion reaches full blossoming, one becomes perfectly awakened. Therefore, you are the quality that makes the Buddha a Buddha. So beginning with this stanza, the author is kind of starting another thread of another thread of thought in regard to the quality of compassion, in saying you are what makes Buddha a Buddha, what makes Dharma a Dharma, what makes Sangha a Sangha. Kind of saying that great compassion, you are the Buddha maker, you are the Dharma maker, you are the Sangha maker, Sangha maker, right? Like we have this expression of kingmaker, game changer, right? So you are the game changer here. You are the Buddha maker, you are the Dharma maker, you are the Sangha maker. So when the potential for meditating on great compassion reaches full blossoming, one becomes perfectly awakened. Therefore, you are the quality that makes the Buddha a Buddha. Yeah, until and unless compassion has fully blossomed, great compassion, right? Particularly beginning with compassion and pledging compassion to eventually into a stronger one, to eventually maybe mediated by immeasurable compassion, then eventually springing up to great compassion, and that too further developed. And when the potential, in the text itself, when the potential in us of, well, it is saying meditating on, but again, this is that kind of a translation thing here, trying to kind of make up for what is there in the Tibetan. But what I think is being conveyed here is the potential for generating compassion. When that potential is fulfilled, when that potential comes to its full blossoming, right? When the potential for compassion reaches its culmination, that's another way of saying it, then one becomes fully awakened. So that's saying at the state of fully awakened, compassion would have fully blossomed. And thus, it's not until that happens that someone becomes fully awakened Buddha. And partly it's because when the force of compassion, when the potential for compassion is there and it's further developed and whatnot, then the qualities of the bodhisattvas and of the Buddha in progression kind of appears. They are generated, and thus it's not until all of the qualities of a Buddha are awakened or realized that one doesn't become Buddha. And for that, the force of compassion is must. It's the compassion that kind of keeps the Buddhist bodhisattvas on the track. It's not until they reach, which is that, it is not until they reach, I think, it varies with the level of faculty of the bodhisattvas. In the case of the sharp faculty bodhisattvas, around the time they are on the path of preparation, they then begin to develop this confidence that yes, now I do not have to worry about losing my bodhicitta, which is completely hinging on compassion. But then in the case of other ones with lesser levels of faculty or not, they have to wait until the eighth path. They have to be really, really always cautious, like we have been cautious in this time, right? They have to be always cautious and wary of what might happen, what conditions might sneak in, right? And that's not until then. And then even with the confidence also, they are not done. They have to still then pursue further. And these all pursuance carrying on depends on the force of compassion. So that's how you are the maker of Buddha. You make Buddha the Buddha. Then in the case of the Dharma, all of the Buddha's teachings, which have the nature of nonviolence, are informed by compassion. Thus, you are the quality that makes the Dharma the Dharma. It is interesting to make this connection between compassion and the pervasive nature of the teachings of the Buddha. I'm reminded of a statement in, I think maybe Tena Chuni. I think maybe Shijepa, the 400, I think. Yeah, I think that's 400 stanzas, where in the course of debate with non-Buddhists, the author, Aryadeva, was asked to define Dharma after he had rejected all other concepts of Dharma that others are proposing and others are kind of abiding to. So then he was asked, if so, then what is Dharma to you? That's where he says, I think he says that ultimately non-harm, right? Harmlessness, non-harm is the nature of Dharma. And the non-harm is not defined by how it looks from outside. It is where it comes out, it springs out from. That is pointing to the mental state out of which all other actions springs out. And thus, whether an action, be that mental action or physical action, verbal action, is in line with Dharma or not, it depends on the foundational mental state, mental ground from which it appears. And that mental ground has to be, at the very least, a non-harming, in the nature of non-harm. So non-harm is the basic component of compassion. It is what compassion hinges on. Actually, in the Abhidhamma, when it explains the nature of different natures of mental factors, one of them is mitsewa, literally means non-harm. Another of them is sewa, which is harmful. So both of them are counted among the 51 mental factors, so-called mental factors, and then within the mental factors, particularly in the Abhidhamma, there is this talk about which of them are even more essential and which of them are like secondary, or I don't know how to call it. The literal term is zeyue taoyue, substantially existent and imputationally existent. So it is almost from a scientific point of view, it's almost like talking about what are elements and what are compounds. Yeah, what are elements and what are compounds? Let's for now use this. What are element mental factors and what are compound mental factors? Right. So in that respect, non-harm, the so-called non-harm as a mental factor, as well as harming as a mental factor, has been counted among the what we might call compound mental factor, of which the element mental factors are shetang meba, lack of hatred, as well as shetang me jam it is of the element mental factor, more fundamental mental factor. There's one called absence of hatred, another called absence of ignorance, another called absence of attachment. I don't know how else to call them, because Tibetan word is shetang mepa, right? Non-attachment, non-hatred, non-hate, and non-ignorance. I don't know. So they are considered the essential mental factor, of which the so-called non-harm and harm are considered compound mental factor. But nonetheless, when it comes to identifying what would be the nature of either maitreya, loving kindness, or that of compassion, it points to non-harm. It points to non-harm, saying it is non-harm in nature. And non-harm in turn is a compound mental factor, kind of imputed on non-hatred. So they all fall in the same category, not just same category, but fall in the same group, same substance. And then, yes, interestingly, in Abhidhamma, when it comes to explaining the four immeasurables, let me look at my notes here. When it comes to explaining the four immeasurables, it does so by saying what are its objects of focus, what are its object of apprehension, and what are its actual nature, whatnot. Then it points to number misewa, non-harm as the element, mental factor, of which both loving kindness and compassion are made of. And then earlier I said that when Aryadeva was asked what then in his position is Dharma, after he has refuted all the positions of others, then he says that Dorna, now I remember, Dorna Chuni Misewa. In short, Dharma is non-harm. Dorna Chuni Misewa, that's what Tathagatas have told. The Dharma is basically, essentially, non-harm in nature. And then and the means to fully fully realize the potential of non-harm, in terms of really kind of realizing or seeing the Dharma at work, it relies on the understanding of emptiness. That leads to the Nyangende, that leads to the Nirvana, that leads to the freedom from the sufferings. that leads to the ultimate total freedom from the sufferings. But the means to that, but the way to do that is by resorting to Dharma, which in essence is non-harm in nature. So that's what it is pointing to, because compassion is grounded on that, and at its core is non-harm. And then when it is developed further, then it could grow into reaching out to others and helping others. Otherwise, there cannot be, because if we want to help others, that is premised on our desire not to harm others. On that premise, then we build this additional condition or facility of reaching out and helping others. They cannot be helping others if at core we want to harm them. They cannot be. So that's how the Dharma is at its core. Invariably, all Dharmas have to be have this non-violence or non-harm in this nature, right? And thus they are informed by compassion at any given level, at their respective levels of development. And thus you are who makes Dharma the Dharma. So I think this is very significant in that it reminds us as Buddhists that, and I have heard this very clearly spoken by the late Dunjum Rinpoche as well, in a very, very eloquent way, saying, after all, everything we do in the name of Dharma, be that at the initial level of the simple practice to the very sophisticated practice of the tantric highest yoga tantra or whatnot, all are means to combat afflictions at their respective levels, be that at the gross manifest level or deeper still, or even deeper to the roots, or even to the subtle stains of them. That's all what Dharma is. And that's what will ensure the prospect of genuine joy and happiness that Dharma is supposed to bring. And the way to do that is by never ever, never ever missing the target, which is always, and it's something to do with affliction. If what we do in the name of Dharma is only making our affliction stronger, like we learn Dharma, we study Dharma and practice Dharma, and then realize something, and then on the side of it we become more arrogant and more disrespectful to others, arrogance, or any kind of, or biasness, right? Bias, all of that. If that is what is happening, then it's a clear sign. You don't have to do any more, any divination or nothing. You have to just ask yourself what's happening, and that's a clear sign that Dharma is off track. The Dharma practice that you're doing is off kilter. Yeah, this is where I'm reminded of William James' statement, right? You have heard this from me several times, although I don't know if I can quote this verbatim, where he says, well, many people think they are thinking when they are merely adjusting their prejudices. So they think that they're doing something, right? And then doing the right thing in getting rid of prejudice, in getting rid of anger, jealousy, whatnot. But what they end up doing is keeping the prejudices intact. I mean, not even undermined or harmed, if at all not blown it up, and then adjusting it to someone, right? Someone else. So it's just a mere adjustment, but not the afflictions having gone any less. Then this could very, very easily happen when there is a disconnect between what we do in the name of Dharma and what we really succeed in doing. The other day, let me look at this. Yeah, I have come across this statement here in a text. Oh, by the way, since we haven't had any light moment in this session, let me contribute here. Last time I was at the Abbey was when our friend Jane Compton was there, who read the poems from Australia, right? Do you remember? Jane Compton. Venerable Tenzin Sepela will know. Yes. She is her friend who had come there to visit her, and then just happened to be during my visit, and we sat through the bodhicitta deliberations. So she has this book, out of which book of poems that she read, did a reading that I saw a video of, and I use her book in leading workshops on sea learning. They come very handy. I have to just read and then really kind of do the movement in the class, right? In a poetic rhyming sound, and then let students pick up words, meanings, contents there, and then connect with what it is. So very soon I'm going to do one at the Emory University in a class, and I'm using this poem called Your Heart, where she speaks of the importance of developing our heart as opposed to just focusing on brain. And I'm going to use this poem in making connection with Tibetan culture and Tibetan way of thinking, more particularly informed by Buddhist understanding, because the class is on Tibetan culture. But I'm using this as a medium because because it will be soon after the sessions here with you, and I wouldn't be able to have any slides prepared, nothing. So I'm just going easy with this poem and then connecting at certain point. But that's not the whole point. Main point I'm bringing this up. Under that very same poem, there is this statement, there is this proverb. I don't know if there is a saying ascribed to someone called Sioux. Okay, some tribe of Indians, Sioux Indians. They say this: the longest journey you will make in your life is from your head to your heart. This indeed is. Just use our hand and kind of measure the length. It is not so much, but it takes forever. And particularly if we are wayward and not paying attention, it will be even slower. If we make effort constantly, yes, it will be progressing, but at a very, very slow pace, almost like the bandwidth bar that we see when internet connection is not good. It seems like taking forever, but it is nonetheless moving slowly. So yeah, this is quite telling. The longest journey you will make in your life is from your head to your heart. That indeed is very true. We may have gone to the space, and we may go now that the commercial flight space journey is open. But even having gone there, we would not have connected our head with our heart. After we come back, we may be full of full of new afflictions from outer space. So that means getting even further away from connecting head and heart. It's almost like adding one more station in between. Okay, I will leave it there, maybe, and we can meet at 6:40. Still, two more minutes extra bonus. So all the Buddha's teachings which have the nature of non-violence are informed by compassion. Thus, you are the quality that makes Dharma the Dharma. So, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, when somebody asks him to condense what Buddha Dharma is, then he comes up with this very handy yet very true and to the point assessment to share. He would say, when it comes to conduct, it is rooted in non-violence, non-harm. When it comes to outlook, it is rooted in the outlook of interdependence or dependent origination, dependent arising. And that indeed is, and that is not just a beautiful statement, but rather it is true to its core. And that's something we would do well to remember and remind ourselves, as we saw earlier, that ultimately anything that we do in the name of Dharma, for it to serve as Dharma, so that it serves the purpose of, at the very least, at whatever level, with whatever level, it kind of increases our prospect for genuine joy and happiness. Not just feel good, but really address the source of ill feeling, source of suffering. And thus the process for more sustained joy and happiness is built. And on that basis, we can persistently build on it. So, as I shared it earlier also, in Abhidhamma Kosh by Acharya Vasubandhu, when it deals with the four immeasurables, it says these four immeasurables are the antidotes to harmful intention, etc. Right? So it says harmful intention is the loving kindness is the antidote to harmful intention. Compassion is the antidote to harmful action. There's a difference, right? It's very interesting. Harmful action or harmfulness. For loving kindness, it reserves intention, harmful intention. And for compassion, it says misewa. Misewa in the sense of non-harm. More, it can share some element of the harmful lack of harmful intention, but also extends out into action of harmfulness. And in the case of joy, in the case of empathetic joy, it says it is the antidote to displeasure at the joy, at the achievement of others, right? Mikawa, taking what you call feeling unease, beginning with feeling unease to not liking or feeling even irked by the achievement of others. That's what empathetic joy addresses. And that of equanimity, it serves as the antidote to the obstacles to creating a base for the other three to be generated. So uneven, disturbed, perturbed mental bumps in the form of too much attachment there, too little care here, like that. So it helps in leveling that out so that other three could grow. And then when it comes to identifying the nature of the four, it says, Shetang Mecham, non-hatred, right? Non-hatred is loving kindness, so is compassion. So in terms of the mental substance of loving kindness and compassion is the same, non-harm, but non-hatred, by way of mental factor. So just as someone asked yesterday, it's very right that yes, loving kindness and compassion are very, very close to each other, yet at the same time they are not one and the same thing. We could tease out the differences no matter how subtle it may be, and that difference can serve a special purpose in not only identifying what one has generated, but in terms of what we should access in certain occasions, right? We, just as in the Pali tradition, Pali resources, it mentions there. Likewise, in the case of Abhidhamma also, it connotes, loving kindness connotes a sense of ready, what do you call, generosity, of joy and happiness, being unreserved in wishing others to have joy and happiness upfront. But when we come across suffering, whatnot, then compassion would be the reaction to that, or the response to that. So because of the, no matter the differences are subtle, yet at the same time, it makes for a very significant benefit in identifying them that way, so that we could speak of ways by which we could take advantage of the different mental formations that they are. And then in terms of their nature, in Abhidhamma Kosha itself, in the root text itself, it really kind of takes time in going through the different aspects of the four immeasurables, and it defines the nature of them. In the case of immeasurable loving kindness, it says it takes the form of may others be happy. It's like going up front, wishing everyone happy and joy, right? It's like opening your page with that, and then when you come across obstacles or whatnot, then be prepared to reach out to the other immeasurables to kind of respond to them accordingly. When you see others being suffering, then wish for them to be freed from that. When you see others already having joy and happiness, then rejoice in it, right? And then in the case of the equanimity, kind of taking stock of the obstacles that come in the way of generating these attitudes, wonderful attitudes, fully or integratedly, and thus deal with the obstacles in the form of too much there, too less there, nothing here, right? The distribution is uneven. There is no equity. So equitable distribution to begin with, and then build all of those wonderful development structures that could have a very strong ground. Okay, so now we will deal with stanza 12. So I think I saw in Jose's notes saying that although this is not compassion, although non-violence is not compassion, something like that. I think I challenge that. I challenge that. Compassion is at the very core non-harm, right? May others be freed from suffering, and that has to spring from the stand of not harming, and then from there it grows into extending actions in delivering them from their suffering, beginning with the wish with a commitment, at least on our part, we will not go about harming them. So anyway, the whole of Dharma practice is the whole of Dharma, be that in the form of practice to be imbibed and developed within a continuum, or be that in the sense of the teaching, in the sense of the doctrine itself. It's rooted in compassion. It's rooted in the core element of compassion, which is non-harm, and thus compassion is the Dharma maker. Now the third one, the disciples of our teacher, the conqueror, are distinguished by their execution of the four duties of a Shamana, the discipline that ensures the conduct of compassion. Hence, you are the quality that makes the Sangha the Sangha. This one has connection with Vinaya. In the Vinaya text, apart from dealing with the precepts together with their corresponding downfalls or transgressions, whatnot, there comes a separate portion in Vinaya, where almost like a support system, where a support system is being proposed in one's success, for one's success in the pursuit of the Dharma practice, together, more particularly of one's Vinaya practice. So in that, that constitutes what is called Dhampa, which means instructions. Extra instructions, let me look higher. Extra instructions to help in observing, in protecting, in observing the Vinaya precepts, preceded by knowing what they are, and when it comes to actually practicing them, it gives this extra support system. It provides this extra support system in the Vinaya, which constitutes of instructions, specific instructions, classified specific instructions, or a group of instructions to the male bhikshus and female bhikshunis, and so this so-called the four duties, what we are calling here the four duties of Shamana, comes under that. It comes under that. So by way of this instruction, there is a group of four such instructions which are mainly geared at proposing what would be a congenial, conducive environment, conducive place or residence for someone to to succeed in their Vinaya practice. That constitutes four such instructions dealing with what would be an ideal place to be in. Right, so a solitary place, etc., etc. So and also it says kind of eating the right size, etc. Some of them are from the so-called Changbe Yunden Chunyi, the 12. I don't know how you call it. The 12 qualities of purification. I don't know what you call it, but and then there are there is another group of four such instructions called instructions geared at helping in abandoning transgressions, and that is the same as the four root downfalls, kind of avoiding them. avoiding the four root downfalls. The four root downfalls are what do you call emphasized here. They constitute this particular group of four instructions geared at reminding and instructing the bhikshus as well as bhikshunis. In the case of the bhikshunis, there will be additional four of them, so making a category composition of 8. Anyway, that's basically the four defeats, or the 8 defeats, which are reiterated there in that category. And then comes this 4 so-called gejong chebe chö, which means 4 dharmas or 4 practices that helps in making one a good Shamana, making one a good, if I may, a good truth seeker, a good seeker on the path. And these 4 are, I think, in Jose's note, I think it counts something little different. But anyway, in the Vinaya text, we count 4 of them. They are the first may be if somebody abuses you verbally, right? This is a verbal thing. If somebody abuses you verbally, abstain from abusing in return. And then the second one is, if somebody shows hatred to you, abstain from showing hatred in return. And the third one, share truth, share to. The third one is, if someone physically harms you, right? If someone physically harms you, abstain from physically harming back. And then the fourth one is, if someone criticizes you, finds fault with you, then abstain from finding fault in return. So it's these are practices that are what you call geared more towards maintaining a conduct of compassion all throughout in all of one's interactions. And in the scriptures, these 4 are associated with what makes a good Shamana, what makes a good truth seeker, what makes a good path seeker. If one loses on this, that spoils that integrity. Interestingly, in the Dhammapad, on this in the section on Buddha, Buddha Vaga, that is the section, that is chapter 14. There is an episode where Ananda asks Buddha. There, Ananda asks Buddha, wondering how would the fundamental teachings of the historical Buddha differ from those of the previous Buddhas. And there Buddha says, when it comes to the fundamental teachings, that's very clearly emphasized, because in terms of secondary teachings, in terms of what do you call especially tailored, customized teaching, not just to one specific person, but even to a specific era, right? Even to a specific era or specific the eon, whatnot. There may be differences because of the difference in the era or the eon and the makeup of the beings, etc. But when it comes to the core teaching by whoever the Buddha may be, to sentient beings, it will be all the same. And there he recounts these 3 stanzas. The first one is the one that we recite in our prayer, where we say, this is the teaching of the Buddha. Actually, it should be, this is the teaching of the Buddhas, because there he is recounting where the Buddhas would be would 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 be similar. And he says that avoid, what was the, avoid negative actions, cultivate positive actions, tame your mind. This is the teaching of the Buddhas. So when it comes to that kind of a teaching, there will be no difference from no difference in the teachings of the Buddhas past and the Buddha himself. In that, the next stanza is about this four duties of Shamana, and mainly saying patience or forbearance, right, or tolerance. This is one area where I think using just one singular English term is not enough. We will have to come up. We would have to string them together and then use them once, like this. They all together will cover Sopa, the practice of Sopa. Sopa Katub Tamba Sopade, where he says the practice of patience is the foremost fortitude, right? Sopa Katub Tamba Sopade, Yangen Deva Churches, Sanjesung. The practice of patience is the greatest practice of fortitude, or the greatest fortitude, and that is supreme in abandoning sufferings. That's what the Buddha taught. Then the following 2 lines is exactly drawing from this particular instruction, saying an ordained being, an ordained bhikshu or bhikshuni, when they harm others, or when they harbor harmful intention, or when they harm others, they are not worthy to be called Shamana. And then there is a third one. So those 3 stanzas are quite telling, in that irrespective of what era we may be, so long as we remain sentient beings, or so long as we are addressing sentient beings' problem, for it to be successful, it would have to always touch on their mental element. Anything short of that will fall short of giving any sustained means of promoting their joy and happiness. I think, as simple as the teaching may be, it is very, very telling. It's saying that we cannot hope for some physical pill or device or something to take care of us. That is never to be hoped for, nor it will be possible. They can only help in mitigating physical inconveniences and whatnot. But when it comes to mental peace and joy and happiness, the means, the methods should as well be mental. And in the case of the individual beings, personal. Of course, it could be drawn in terms of inspiration, lessons, hints from others, which is very available without asking. Without further asking, we get that everywhere. So long as we are careful in looking for them. I used to tell, right? I used to tell, and I really mean that. Tell about this label that people put against food that's remaining from a party, whatnot. They will put it on a table and say, please, what is that? Please help yourself with it, right? So it's available, like food there is available there without being held by anyone, and one has to just help oneself in terms of what would benefit oneself, what would fit with one's system and whatnot. Likewise, in terms of clues, instructions, insights, messages, whatnot, it's available everywhere, anytime, right? And to a great extent, others are a big part in kind of making that available. But when it comes to actually making a difference from that, it takes for one's own action and action. And so this particular stanza that deals with this particular instruction, as well as the other instructions, are very telling in that, yes, no matter how many Buddhas will come, whenever they come, so long as it has to do with sentient beings, it would have to be essentially in taming the mind. It's because of the untamed mind that the sufferings happen. And the way to deal with that is to know one's mind and deal with it properly. And then when it comes to actually putting it into practice, it takes the form of avoiding negativities, upholding positivities, and then, if possible, going even deeper in clearing the mental dirts. So, with regard to these 4 duties of Shamana, I have something to share here. I think because when it comes to ordinary beings and those of us at the beginning stage of our progression, we really have to try as hard as maybe to practice this, to not be so generous in reciprocating others' negativities. Don't practice that generosity. So have to be really mindful in kind of sticking to this and refraining from reciprocating accordingly. Because for us, we would, as a beginner, it would be very difficult to distance mental state with a physical action. As we develop further and further and further, we will be able to see the gap between what they call the attitude and the impulse and the action. And also we'll be able to really exercise some control over the mind and be more independent in how we want to project outside. It could look like one is now hitting someone or one is now abusing someone, but not with the corresponding negative afflictions within us. So long as that is not possible, and this kind of a practice, hard as maybe and so counterintuitive and so almost like so unpopular as it may be, it is the only way by which one could be protected from the suffering. And also the world could be made to have less suffering. If somebody beats one and you beat back, there will be 2 beatings. And if he beats back, there will be 3 beatings likewise. So we keep on adding to the number of beatings in the world. And however much number of beatings there that means more suffering. So goes the same with abuse and all of that. If you give into this kind of a generosity, that will only add to suffering, beginning with oneself and to others, right? So as counterintuitive and as unpopular this may be, it is something to really practice and give thought in practicing it. And eventually one will begin to kind of appreciate the sensibility of this and the practicality of this. And then eventually there will be a possibility of being flexible with how one want to or need to appear outward, yet still not incur breaching this instruction. But until then, it would be good to even abstain from indulging in the physical actions themselves. Okay, I think then we'll move on to stanza 13. Yeah, there's a great deal of difference between one who possesses great compassion, in one's mind stream, and those who do not, like the Supreme Teacher and Shariputra, the former of whom restored the life's breath of the swan, while the latter not. I have not come across this particular episode, this particular story. Although in Jose's note, he says that someone points to Dulva Shi, which is, I think, Vinaya Vastu. I didn't get chance to look at there. I will try. But from our more popular stories, it would seem like where we have Shariputra would be Devadatta. But here it is very clearly Shariputra, and then even Jose's note is affirming that yes, somebody has found a story to that, which, if true, is really pointing to a new episode, a totally unknown episode for me, and I'll push on searching for that, and and likewise you can do and sharing this with us.
Yeshila, I think it's when the Buddha was a child. The incident when he saved the life of a swan that Devadatta tried to shoot.
Yeah. So in that case, it would be Devadatta.
Yeah.
But here it says Shariputra. So that's the reason. I was giving the benefit of the doubt to the mention of Shariputra and wondering if there might be another episode similar to that. But I tried and I didn't find it. Yeah, that was my initial reaction to this also. This must have been misprint, or it should be Devadatta, because the mention of swan and that particular incident seem to point to that. But surprising enough, in the initial translation copy that you have of Jose, even in the note also, he's saying that someone has found this. He doesn't point finger at the mention of Shariputra, which could be mistaken, but instead seem to affirm that there might be an episode like that, except he could not find it. Yeah, but I agree. My reaction was the same. But basically, it is saying that whoever possesses great compassion, compassion, any level of compassion one has, I mean, it would be evident to others, and it would be very, very evident to oneself in how one carries oneself around people, around situations, in the midst of difficulties, problems, and the challenges in life. How having that in one's mental continuum really, really kind of turns things around. So, yeah, I mean, great compassion may be a little, it may be a long shot for many of us, including myself, but nonetheless, compassion is something to be really, really within one's reach, is something to be really, really worked for and tried on. This is, without compassion, it's like our mental space, mental ground will become arid, dry, with no plants of positivities growing, if at all. Ooh, weird, eerie, negative plants growing. Or no plants at all, green plants or positivities growing at all. Because it's like every positivity hinges in this commitment to not harming others. If there is even a slight part of one's mind that yes, when situation requires, I will harm someone, that would be a big crack there to let so many other awful things to come out, and also to bring in so many things into that into that space. So in this regard, I mean, for one's own selfish interest also, one has to be paying attention to cultivating compassion, knowing very carefully, very carefully and mindfully that yes, deep down it is non-harm. And somehow through reflection, if we could reflect and then convince ourselves and give rise to this conviction that no matter what comes, I will not be willingly harming anyone. My mind will be never buying into intentionally harming someone. Period. Right? Oh, that commitment, the moment you generate it, it's like the dirty air in the mind is cleared. And that will inform one's own physical and mental actions as well. And then that will affect the environment, the surrounding, and the whole society, community, like that. And we can see in our own life how people are affecting each other's community, society, by what their basic standing is on this issue of harming or not harming others. And that's something that we not only should pursue for our own personal goal, but should promote. And that would be the surest way of promoting world peace, genuine peace, lasting peace, all of that. None of any extra doing will be enough. Of course, they can add to it, but the basic must-have criteria is this. Not compassion in a grand sense, in its grandeur sense, but the basic core element of not harming others, and then beginning to grow from there with that root intact, then beginning to reach out to others and helping others. That would be like a flower, right, with its proper root in the ground, in a fertile ground. Otherwise, deep down, if we are kind of ready to harm others if need be, or if even indulge in it, then no, we cannot hope for any positive growth out of that. We may seem like, and yeah, in this regard, I want to share this. I make a distinction between intention and motivation. In some occasions, this distinction comes really handy in really making things clear. Basically, it is the motivation, what motivates us to do what we do. But in terms of intention, what we intend to do, build something, grow something, give something, but with what motivation? So that they could be deceived, they could be brought to my fold, they could support me, etc., etc. So there is no proper motivation there, and thus that kind of a service will not sustain, and that could even have wrong, bad consequences. So what we intend to do has to be really grounded in proper motivation, and if we do so, we ourselves will be the first and foremost one to benefit from it. It's not so much the scale of what you do, the reach of what you do, that matters in the ultimate. It is with what motivation you do. And then with that motivation, we do not have to merely confine to doing spitty things. It could be grow. We could have the hope and aspiration and destination, aim to do big. But first and foremost, the one thing that we need to make sure is the motivation. So again, this is one area where we need to be very careful in using the English term, motivation, intention. Because there are occasions when we need to make distinction between that. So it will be good to use reserve motivation for the basic source, and intention beyond that in terms of what you intend to do. But main thing is what motivates you to do. Yeah, in this regard, I want, yeah, like we talked about anger yesterday. Basically, what I was saying yesterday in our exchanges was, anger is an English term, and it has to be used with that meaning and connotation. So in Tibetan, we have these two terms, kongdo and shedang. Shedang is usually translated as hatred, but the problem is with kongdo, people easily translate it as anger, whereas in the actual original source, they are just two names for the same one thing. So that means kongdo is also hatred, shedang is also hatred. Hatred, I think, though an English term, seems to be closer to the main meaning of it. So for us Tibetans, we should be careful not to jump into using into using the word anger for kongdo, and for the Westerners also, it would be have to be clear in using anger and hatred differently, and aware of that kongdo and shedang are they mean the same thing, and thus using anger for one of them will not be the right thing unless we want to equate anger with hatred. So here, as I was emphasizing the need for compassion, in other religions they speak of love. I think in Christian, in one of the Christian texts, not in the Bible, but other texts called Corinthians, I think Corinthians 13 or something. There is a statement, not that I know it by heart, but there is something mentioning about faith, hope, and love, out of which ultimately is love that matters. So from among the three also it is love. And love, as we understood, even from the Buddhist perspective, when it means wishing for others to have joy and happiness, it is like a brother or sister to compassion, and that the two kind of grow simultaneously. And without that clear demarcation, what we call love in that context could as well include compassion. And thus, it's really important to know where these major religions are pointing at in terms of what ultimately matters. Even the Beatles, the band, the Beatles agree with you, agree with us, agree with me. Love is what you need, right? They say what you need. They should have said love is what we need. Not just you, but all of us, including the singers. Love is what we need.
All you need. All you need.
Oh yeah, love is all you need. Oh, thank you. So you know the lyrics. Let's sing it together. Love is all you need. Yes.
You want to hear it, Geshe?
Yeah, I definitely want to hear. Yeah, love is all you need. It's just not you. It's everyone. Love is all we need. We all need. So in this regard, I may use this term, xeriscaping. Xeriscaping.
Zero-scaping?
it is xeriscaping or xeroscaping?
How do you spell it?
It's Xeri.
It's a form of landscaping.
Yeah, it is a form of landscaping meant. Yeah, it's a form of landscaping meant for conserving water by introducing drought-resistant plants.
We're going to go there soon, Geshe.
So I virtually see our mind becoming that arid without compassion. So with whatever level practice we can pull up, even if it means introducing drought-resistant plant, any means. By that what I meant is look into oneself and see what works in really pulling up even a slight tinge of compassion, warmthness, warm-heartedness, and can then kind of conserve it, kind of preserve it, hold on to that, and then let it grow. Eventually, the whole landscape of our mind can become fertile to give rise to all other wonderful qualities. But if it takes to resorting to this kind of landscaping or mental scaping, then be it. That's what I wanted to convey. So maybe, yeah, we have to adopt that. So this is something that we need to be very, very serious about, compassion, because very often we think of compassion as something that we lose out, that we give someone and others get it, we don't. That is definitely not the case, and we should not give into that what do you call that mechanistic reaction to this. Rather have to take things in our charge and know for ourselves ins and outs of what compassion is, no matter in whatever level, degree, or scale it may be. And that would be good to pursue practice on oneself and promote in the world, in directly or indirectly. That can really go the furthest way in promoting in promoting and improving our situation. I think at the core, whatever bodhisattvas do, that is at the core of it, and that's something we each and every one of us need to be very, very convinced about, without any doubt. And kind of every moment, every morning when we come out, that's a kind of a commitment that yes, one thing I commit myself is not intentionally harm others. I will never go there, take what it may, which means it doesn't rule out standing up for the situation if need be, except not with a harmful intention. There is a possibility there. If we try and try and try, who knows, we will be able to really, what do you call, avail that gap. And even kind of, what do you call, even kind of insulate it with a sense of care, sense of genuine care, even for the perpetrators of negativities, crimes, and whatnot. And then we don't have to worry about others, right? About needing any kind of insulation. So that's what I want to end here for today. And we can open the question and answer sessions here. Thank you.
I was wondering if maybe Shariputra was mentioned here, not because he was present at the situation with the swan, but in comparing a fully awakened one with an arhat, where the fully awakened one, even as a boy, was able to heal the swan, but an arhat would lack the great compassion. Just a thought. I don't know. Maybe it's a
yeah, it's interesting. But if we are pointing to a historical episode, particularly the one that took place between Buddha and Devadatta, then at that time, Shariputra was not around. He was not around. And unless we have an episode to attach with Shariputra, we cannot subject him to this. that would be unfair, particularly in his absence. Yeah, but I do take your point, because one important distinction between great compassion and other compassions is how forceful the sense of concern is to in relation to generating an action, assuming that both of them are directed towards all sentient beings, whatnot. But when it comes to how quick and potential it is to generate an action, actual action, that's one area of big difference between great compassion and other compassions. So that's what we haven't touched on so far. But that definitely is one point, and that's what Venerable Lobsangla is aiming at.
Geshe, I've been still chewing on something you said on the first day. You were talking about the bodhisattvas saying that that they always consider all forms of suffering, the three kinds of dukkha, not just the suffering of pain, of change, or pervasive condition dukkha, but also the cognitive obscuration form of suffering. Could you talk a little bit? Are you talking about the suffering of arhats, or talking? I would like to know more about what kind of dukkha in regards to cognitive obscurations Buddha bodhisattvas wish to free beings from.
Mm-hmm. It would be interesting to see whether the explicit mention of suffering is there around the bodhisattvas. Very often we hear fears of samsara, nirvana, etc., etc., but not necessarily explicitly mentioning it as suffering. But even if it does, in the case of, from the perspective of bodhisattva, even the state of individual liberation, being stuck there, would be considered some kind of a constraint, some kind of a abyss, some kind of a what do you call abyss? Yeah, some kind of an abyss, and particularly from a bodhisattva point of view, something to be really to be feared about, to be really cautioned against, because that's one that they could slip into, which would mean not only losing their own individual integrity, whatnot, but along with it, what do you call, losing on the prospect of so many others. So there will be so in the text there was clear mention of fears, all fears of samsara and nirvana. So definitely that's fear. I don't know if the other term is called nyangin, and in Tibetan I have seen it, the word dungel tamje, all suffering, all dukkha. So again, suffering is what we are using here for dukkha, but if we say all dukkha, then it seems like we can put up with it. But if we say all suffering, it may be a little difficult to put up with it. That may have to do with the English term we are using. But so we have to think of dukkha from the perspective of bodhisattva, constraints from the perspective of bodhisattva, which may not be constrained necessarily at all levels. Something to be shunned, it is relative, So something to be shunned at the bodhisattva level can be something to be really, really worked for, aspired for, and without any mistake, without anything wrong with that. So that's one thing to be considered when we were speaking of what might constitute dukkha or not from a bodhisattva point of view.
I have a question, Geshe-la. Regarding the second kind of compassion, projecting into permanence, contributing to suffering of sentient beings. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more and give example?
Yeah, projecting permanence in things. Oh, it is very interesting. Even in the scriptures also it mentions afflictions, afflictions given rise by self-grasping, afflictions given rise by grasping at self-sufficient person, afflictions given rise by grasping at permanence, like that. Afflictions given rise by grasping wrongfully at dukkha, at the dukkha nature of things. So, which is to say that all of these dukkhas invariably are grounded in the self-grasping attitude, and from the prasangika madhyamika point of view, it's only by rooting out this self-grasping that all of these other afflictions can be rooted out. But nonetheless, there can be some afflictions which share both the projection at permanence and the projection at inherent existence as its cause. There can be some which could be sharing three things, 3 layers, 4 layers, like that. So, although by merely understanding impermanent nature, that suffering, that affliction which generates suffering, that affliction generated by projection of permanence will not be uprooted, but it will definitely be deflated and and overcome by understanding, by deflating what is fueling it, which is the projection of permanence. So that's what it is being alluded to there, and that's very interesting. In the illumination of the intent text, you will see the mention of a class of affliction which is only sensed, which is only appreciated and sensed, or which is only appreciated and accounted for by the prasangika madhyamikas, but not by others. And likewise, you could go the same way, saying afflictions that are only appreciated by Chittamatra and up, but not by others. Depending on how deep one goes in pointing at a root of it. So for the realists, grasping at inherent existence was not a problem at all. It was not a mistaken consciousness at all, and they would not they would not assign any afflictions to that. So afflictions, subtle afflictions, it could be even gross afflictions also, but they would never tie it to such a root. But in the case of afflictions that are rooted in projection of permanence, I think that's something that all of these schools agree, except they differ in what these afflictions in turn are rooted in. They go deeper and deeper and deeper. And I can give you an example. This class is very boring, and I'm not showing any sign of finishing anytime. Keeps going and saying, oh, we will go 4 stanzas more, 10 stanzas more. Then you begin to think, oh, this is not going to end. As soon as you begin to think, you generate sense of anxiety, right? Oh, the body will begin to react to that. As soon as I said, stop, we won't go. It's like, release there. It may not happen with you, but I have myself experienced it. Really experimented it. I have seen how that projection, however wrong it may be, really has a real effect. I mean, that's the same case with all of these projections, right? What they project onto something, what they project onto something, what they project is not real, but the grasping is real, and that's what is having the effect. Yeah, I used to have that when trying internet early on, when the connectivity was not good, I would see the band, whatever the bar, not even moving. It's like staying put and feeling like this is staying put forever. And suffering there. Where's it going? Even without that also, you could have just let go of that, and then there will be none of that. None of that. Oh, anger, it could come in the form of anger, anxiety, all of this, having a very practical effect on your body. Yeah, so that's what it's being pointed at. Yeah, and yes. In this regard, I may point you to a line in Kamalashila's stages of meditation. I think the middle one, where he was pointing to the insights into impermanent nature, insights into the suffering nature of samsara, insights into the selfless nature of phenomena, insights into the empty nature of phenomena. Those four insights, right? Even touched on at the lower school levels. Those are considered very essential insights to generate, and they have existential, if I may call it, existential impact. The reverse are existential problems from a Buddhist perspective, and that can be tested through experiment on oneself, how they are really crucial. And in the Pali tradition, they speak of three characters, right? Three or four characters. But Tibetan sources, even in the Sutra, kind of insist on four. The four perverted pardon?
The four distortions, the four distortions.
Yes. The four distortions. And the opposite are the four rightful insights. So, pointing at these four insights, Kamalashila in his text points to how these are steps towards eventually understanding the deepest insight, or generating the deepest insight into emptiness. So not only they help in addressing their respective distortions that can generate their own level of sufferings, but the insights themselves are something to be valued for how they can serve as a springboard to eventually fine-tune one's understanding insight into understanding the subtlest impermanence, subtlest reality. And the expression used there is tekonanila, sholva, tekonanila, papa, tekonanila, neba, means something that is going towards the reality, something that is going towards the reality, now flowing into the reality, now being into the reality, something like that. So that's what he was pointing to, these insights for their value in gradually drawing us into the subtlest understanding as well.
Geshe, I was curious about when you mentioned that the Arya Bodhisattvas can flick between the different types of passion in not necessarily a certain order, in terms of the one with the aspect of suffering or impermanence or emptiness. Can you elaborate a bit more on how, whether they would put more emphasis on one at a different time? I would assume that the one seeing the emptiness of inherent existence would be more powerful, compassion. So,
I think if they were to intentionally think of what to choose from like that, then depending on what would be pertinent, they would choose that. Otherwise, what I feel is happening is that they have generated these insights within them, and they carry them with them in the dormant form with kind of influence on what they are doing, but not as actively. And whatever catches their attention, depending on what they come across, then they will just readily pull that up and activate that. But otherwise, on specific occasions, when it is an occasion for a particular focus, then they would definitely intentionally go there, and that's what would be generated there. And then say the situation either deliberately induced, either it calls for deliberately induced compassion, or the situation itself calls for compassion, depending on what of those insights happen to be activated for whatever reasons could be influencing it. So I think it would be like really like, yeah, this is quite interesting. In the Sutra on the wisdom of the hour of death, right? The Sutra on the wisdom of hour of death.
Oh, what we chant on Tuesdays.
Oh, yeah. Oh. The Sutra on the wisdom of the hour of death. Yeah, there it points out 5 reflections or five main points. And Buddha's revealing that is instigated by some bodhisattva, mahasattva, Akashagarbha. I think it was Akashagarbha bodhisattva, who asks Buddha, although the translations vary. I had to, I don't know this. When I have to deal with English translations, I always have something to say. So I came across 2 translations. They vary, not in terms of what they would casually do, but in terms of what how it is conveyed. But anyway, I see it as not saying how a bodhisattva should train, because that was not the question. Question was, how should we look at the mind of a bodhisattva at the point of death? So it's saying, what are the insights there? What insights can we get if we were to pick into the mentality of the mind of the bodhisattva? What could we expect? Right. So there's something to be said about the order of what Buddha reveals, beginning with emptiness and other very profound contemplations, or other very profound perceptions, or other very profound understandings, and what I'm calling other very profound outlooks they will be carrying with them. So what it suggests is they carry them with them. They have them. They have built them, and they have dwelled on them. They have generated it to the strength that they would require to really have an effect. But when it comes to reaching out to them and utilizing them, it will depend on the situation. And for them, it is not a question of whether they would have or not, they would already have that because of having trained in all of these different outlooks, all of these different perspectives or perceptions. But they would have them ready. And each one of them will be, in the meantime, each one of them will be informing, influencing, invigorating each other. But depending on the situation, they would then be pronouncing one over the other. So that's exactly what I think a bodhisattva, an Arya bodhisattva would do in terms of the three compassions. Yeah.
There's one question online. Is there time?
Yeah, that would be good to take one question from online.
Okay. So is Geshe including anger in the 10 non-virtues? If not, what is the Tibetan for anger in the 10 non-virtues?
This is a very interesting question. By the way, you're giving me a good chance to make some point here. When you say 10 non-virtues are actions. The non-virtues, be that non-virtues or the virtues, we are speaking of actions, not the afflictions. This is so interesting. Now we can all agree that the 7 non-virtues of the body and speech are actions, they are not afflictions. Right? But napsem nesem lokta, they are not kleshas. They are not kleshas. They are not, I mean, in English we may very liberally call afflictions because afflictions are something that are unwanted, right? Negative something, affliction. But they are not kleshas. They are not the so-called dissonant mental states within the kleshas. They are something springing out of the kleshas. Kleshas are at the root out of which these actions happen. And the actions also happen at the mental level. So anger is not among the is not among the 10 non-virtues. If at all, we'll be looking into the 3 non-virtues of the mind. They are napsem nesem lokta, covetousness, although we are calling it covetousness, but it is almost pointing to a mental klesha, but it is not. It is something springing out of it. And so is nesem. Nesem is humble intention. It has to come from, it could come from anger, jealousy, greed, hatred, all of that. And so is lokta. The non-virtues, they are only counted as 10, but they do not, it is not a comprehensive, exhaustive list. In the Abhidhamma Kosha, it also says, just come up with a rough classification of them, give and take, we can come up with 10, but that doesn't cover all of them. So there can be so many other non-virtuous, mental, physical, verbal actions, but they are not kleshas. Anger is one of the kleshas. They are even further more fundamental. So this is a very, very, very welcome question, and that's what something that I have paid attention to. But there are other things that I can comment on, but we can wait for next time.